Hey everyone, welcome to our Rebel Roundup, sometimes painfully live stream show. Today is Friday, January the 9th, and it's supposed to be our panel. So we're hoping that we will bring on our special guest today, Caryma Sa'd. And for now, you are joined by myself, your host, Tamara Ugolini, and our British Columbia correspondent, Drea Humphrey, who's kind of the regular on the weekly show. I'm filling in today for David Menzies, who's out in the wild, putting how the attack on free speech in this country is still underway as we head into the new year 2026. Drea, how are you doing over there?
I'm good. First live stream of the year, and I got a new mic, and it's exposing my unhealthy obsession with color purple. It's a bit crooked, I think. So I'm working on it, but I'm feeling good. It's already started off as a very wild year, and we're what, just a week and a half in? So
Already, yes. It started off with a bang, and here we are. And we apologize for the delay. We're having a few technical difficulties, and as I mentioned, we're hoping to bring Caryma on, and we were just kind of waiting to see if that would happen right off the hop or what. So, regardless, we're going to be chatting today on the stream about the unemployment, continually rising unemployment in Canada. Meat is being locked up at a British Columbia grocery store, if you can believe it. And then Iran is protests are getting increasing. And
absolutely.
people are saying after, rolling protests after the last few years and arguably for much longer than that,
Hmm.
maybe they will be liberated. So we're going to
Maybe.
talk about some of that. But before we get into it, let me tell you how you can support us, our efforts, and our show. If you're watching us on YouTube, you can give us what's called a super chat, or after we're done being live, you can give us a super thanks. And so while we are live through a $5 donation or more, if you feel so inclined, we will read your comment, tip, maybe even criticism on air and provide some feedback or commentary on it. And it's a great way just to have your voice heard on a broader scale, but also to support our work and keep the lights on. And we always, as always, we would not be here today if it weren't for the generosity of our supporters and our donors. So thank you in advance for that. And then if you prefer to watch us over on Rumble, the ones who didn't silence, and
Hmm.
censor everyone throughout the manufactured consent during the COVID hysteria, you can do that with a Rumble rant as well. So, same kind of $5 donation or more if you are able to. Rule applies there. So, we have started late. And again, I apologize for that, but we'll get right into the Iran protests.
Yeah.
They have been cut off, and we mentioned it very briefly yesterday on the stream because I think this happened yesterday or in the night before. Anyway, time change and everything like this. But in the last day or two, protesters have been cut off from the world as the internet has been blacked out. This piece comes from the Globe and Mail, and it comes as Khomeini warns protesters that, well, he's trying to curb the protests because they're rising up against his government. So he's the being called the supreme leader here in this Globe and Mail article. And it says Iran was largely cut off from the outside world on Friday after authorities blacked out the internet to curb expanding protests, with phone calls not reaching the country, flights canceled, and online Iranian news sites only intermittently updating.
Hmm.
Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei accused protesters of acting on behalf of US President Donald Trump, saying rioters were attacking public properties and warning that Tehran would not tolerate people acting as mercenaries for foreigners. It all of this began, they say, over soaring inflation in the Islamic Republic late last month, and have since spiraled into the biggest for 3 years, with unrest reported in every province and rights groups documenting dozens of deaths. And many in the streets here are championing this
Hmm.
and saying finally the Iranian people will be free from the stranglehold of their supreme leader.
I
And
prefer regime leader sounds better to
yeah,
me, but whatever. Yeah.
I like to refer back to just the Globe and Mail, right? When they say the
Yeah.
supreme leader,
Mhm.
to put it nicely, I would say. But I wanted to touch on a really great report that Guillaume Roy in our Quebec correspondent team, he's the
Mhm.
videographer for Alexa. So usually you don't see him. And actually, I don't even think you saw him in his report that he did a few days ago covering a protest in Montreal where people were supporting the protests that are happening in Iran. And it finally gave people a voice that weren't chanting, for genocide in the streets in Canada.
Right.
And I think it was roughly 18 minutes. I don't know if we have any B-roll. Yeah, it's just some general viz of this report, but it was really well done by Guillaume. And because Alexa was in Florida while this was taking place, so usually, obviously, she's the go-to girl who would head out into the field and cover these sorts of happenings. But she was in Florida, and so Guillaume took it upon himself to head out in the field and interview these protesters, and they had some really great things to say. So if you haven't seen that report, I would really urge you to go and watch that one from a few days ago. I know that we were supposed to bring Caryma on, and I wanted her to chat a little bit about what is happening as, her and her videographer cover protest mania primarily in Ontario, but of course, the protests kind of ripple all throughout the country about something that they shot yesterday at, I'm going to call it Yonge and Dundas Square. It's called Sankofa Square now, I guess,
Oh, I
after
didn't
millions of
know.
dollars were squandered to rename it in under the guise of decolonization, I guess.
Well, at least you can
So
say it. Out here when they change, we can't even read it out here. Just gets
yeah,
into
we're only a little bit away, I think, from that, where it
yeah.
starts to just become the hyphens and
Hmm.
various letters strung together. So this is a 6-minute clip. And again, I don't know. I guess we should just talk about it now. And then if Caryma comes on later, we can kind of circle back and chat more about what they're documenting in the streets of, again, primarily Toronto, Ontario, a little bit of Ottawa. Um, it was about, I think, the 1 minute 40-second mark that things got kind of interesting. I'm just trying to pull the clip up again here. What's going on with my computer? Sorry. And so basically, these protesters, and I'm not even sure what they're protesting, to be honest. Pardon my ignorance. If you're watching, if you want to give us a comment, Caryma, are you joining us? What is happening here? So these are Kurdish protesters at Yonge and Dundas Square, now called something else. They are expressing apprehension about their demonstration being documented, as most, not to say they're necessarily bad faith, but as most bad faith demonstrators do, right?
Hmm.
And a few of them are attempting to physically block the camera. And then, so they bring in the police, and it's about the 1 minute and 40-second mark where I really appreciate what the police had to say.
All right, let's.
1:30-ish. We can maybe just play that clip. Yeah. We're like, all right, come on, guys.
Distance for us, if you don't mind.
Absolutely. They came up to me. I'm going to keep moving. Thank you.
Okay.
Oh, it was a little bit before this. So yeah, I think it was about 1:30. But anyway, they're trying to tattle on the police and they're like, who is this guy recording us?
He's allowed to film in public spaces.
Yeah,
Welcome to Canada.
you're doing a public protest. Like, where is the logic here? We don't want this covered, then why are you in the
Absolutely.
street?
They came up to me. I'm going to keep moving. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
This one.
Oh, he wants the attention.
What is that? I didn't even catch that tattoo. I don't know what that is.
I'm not
Very
sure.
well acquainted with him. He cooperates with us.
So you're good to film? Why?
Look, they're still tattling.
Here to cause you guys any grief. Okay. Sometimes he gets a little close, I get it. But he's usually
I just want to say
Yeah.
one thing,
So-
though, because I don't know any of the context here, but I do recall, in it was probably 2021 when the thing to do was go protest because you couldn't do anything else during lockdowns. And so at Vancouver Art Gallery, there would be like 4 to 5 different groups protesting every single weekend day. And I always just assumed like that the Chinese protests against the CPP, like that they were wearing masks and because of COVID. But then when I spoke with them, they're like, no, we're doing this to protect ourselves, or in particular our family back home, because if our family, or if the government finds out we're protesting here, they're going to go after our family. So I'm not saying that's what's happening there. They're not wearing masks or what have you, and I certainly don't, promote wearing masks. But you never know. There could be another reason for why they're like, no, don't film. But it's like you're doing a protest in a public space and you're not covering up your face. So it is what it is.
Yeah, and the whole point of heading out into the streets to protest
Yeah.
is to get recognition and try to have your voice heard, whatever your cause may be, right? The whole point of protesting is to get on the streets and get some attention and get some, especially some media attention. And so this idea that we have to like tattle on media just because we're terrified that they might not agree with whatever we're protesting. I think that if you're going to come into Canada, you should know that we're supposed to have a free, independent press, a right to that, and that filming in public is 100% allowed, and there's no respectable or reasonable expectation of privacy when you are out in the public square. So if you don't want to be filmed, if you don't want to have your voice heard or partake in any of these public demonstrations, then don't go. And it makes zero sense to me. Many of us, throughout the COVID handling, knew that the mainstream media would somehow spin what people were saying. So many more people are saying, we just don't want to talk to the mainstream media. But everyone, largely understood and grasped the legal concept of filming in public. And so people were like, well, yeah, the mainstream media has a right to be here. They have a right to film us, and they're going to regardless. And it got to a point where I think many Canadians were just kind of like, we don't care anymore. We know that the mainstream media is going to spin this in whatever which way that they will. And we're just going to speak to the media who's going to tell us the truth. And that's how Rebel and other independent media outlets continued to gain notoriety and credibility is by telling people and showing them what was happening in the streets while the mainstream media was trying to quickly concoct and run cover for the state around what was happening with these super spreader events that weren't actually as they painted them. So anyway,
Super hugging event.
yeah, like basically a way to just gather in public because we had been told that you weren't allowed to, while you simultaneously protest the gathering restrictions. So I appreciate the way that the Toronto police kind of reasserted the right to film in public. And he was like, yeah, maybe they're getting a little too close. I beg to differ, but regardless, because often it's these aggressors who come to you.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they're like, try to these intimidation tactics. And you're literally just filming. And we've all been there. We've all seen that. It's been displayed on social media many, many times over the last several years. But here we have one of the oldest Jewish organizations in the world. This comes from the Toronto Sun. B'nai B'rith is backing a letter to Toronto police for better law enforcement at anti-Israel protests. And so the subheading here reads, there have been 800 protests in the city since October 7th, 2024, and more than 1,000 charges, I think it's supposed to say, laid. So B'nai B'rith is both B'nai B'rith's Canada's CEO and a Toronto City Councillor are backing Ontario Solicitor General Michael Kerzner's December 30th letter asking Toronto police to better enforce hate, intimidation, and harassment motivated offenses at anti-Israel protests. And I mean, as they say in that subheading, um, this has been happening since October 7th, 2024. I would say longer than that. They just are pointing to how many, the magnitude of protests in the last, what, year and 3 months. But this has been happening since that October 7th terrorist attack in Israel by Hamas. And so I think this is long overdue, finally.
It's long overdue. And we have our issues out here too in the lower mainland. I mean, we've had a protester try to literally gouge the eyes out of an officer. We've, of course, most of us have now seen the Canadian flags be ripped and the death to Canada, death to the United States, death to Israel. We did arrest a leader of Samadon, which is a terrorist organization entity. We arrested her, but we haven't prosecuted her. I mean, this is, and that's what you're seeing there with thousands of, I guess, I don't know if it was arrests or incidents, but what's actually happening from any of that and what's being emboldened when nothing happens, when these things are occurring. And so, yeah, it's a one law for, what is that? One law for thee and one law for me. I think I said it backwards. You try being a street preacher and, go in the wrong place, say the wrong passage on the Bible. They're always getting arrested for hate and all of these things. But look what you can get away with if you're hating on Israel.
Yeah, and quite literally in Toronto, in a primarily Jewish neighborhood, these protesters are walking through these neighborhoods on little side streets, just there to antagonize and provoke the Jewish neighborhood. And again, Caryma and her videographer have been at the forefront of documenting some of these occurrences. And we've talked about this repeatedly on the stream. Like, this is no longer protesting. You're going into neighborhoods as a provocateur now. And that should absolutely be condemned by law enforcement and action taken to protect the integrity of those neighborhoods. No one there is asking for this, and no one there is out, again, putting themselves out into public domains and public demonstrations to justify the actions of these protesters going into the side streets of primarily Jewish neighborhoods. It's so disgusting. And again, I think long overdue for law enforcement to pick the heat up a little bit. I mean, we saw it when we went with to Stand with David. What was that, 2 years ago, last year? After he was arrested for, I think, the fourth or fifth time, covering protests. Yeah, and we're no better so far in 2026. But you felt the intimidation, and especially when these masked men are approaching you and intimidating, like, us as younger women, and it's very intimidating. And if you're not a strong-minded and a strong-willed person, absolutely you would be fearful in those situations. And the police sadly have taken a back seat to that intimidation. So that's what we have here in Canada. Hopefully this letter does something. I'm not going to hold my breath, I'll be honest. But I think we may have Caryma joining in now. So let's hit a quick ad break. We'll make sure all the audio and video is good, and then we will come back for more on the panel.
Gun bans make great distractions.
Trudeau may be gone, but Carney has picked up his same rhetoric.
We will quickly, and I mean quickly, reinvigorate the buyback of
Hunters, collectors, competitors, and defenders of tradition are still being targeted, while criminals run wild under Liberal policy. But we are fighting back. Join us, Canada's National Firearms Association, in defense of freedom.
Big news! Rebel News now has premium memberships on X, Locals, and right here on YouTube. For just $4.99 a month on YouTube, you'll get loyalty badges, custom emojis, and access to members-only chats during our live streams. At $8.99 a month, you'll also unlock Rebel News Plus shows and our documentaries. But here's the catch. YouTube could cancel that premium tier at any time. That's why the best way to support us is at rebelnewsplus.com. It's just $8 a month, cheaper if you go annual, and you'll get exclusive extras like an ad-free site, comments access, and even the chance to submit op-eds. Wherever you join us, thanks for keeping our independent journalism alive and strong.
You like the hat? Me too. Same strong message about making Canada great again, but in a really cool color, black and gold. There's other colors available, and it's an all Canadian site. So if you want to signal your tribe or trigger a Liberal, go to mcgahats.ca today.
All right, welcome to Caryma, who is a Canadian lawyer and has been on the streets documenting what you call protest mania for the last few years. I think brought on primarily throughout kind of the COVID era. We were chatting a little bit about that, and your videographer. Welcome to the show. Thanks so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Drea and we showed a little bit of that video that I think was posted or was from yesterday. And I love that you called it Yonge and Dundas Square, showing this group of protesters who are basically trying to tattle on the videographer for being in the public space, documenting their very public demonstration, the Kurdish protesters. Can you tell us a little bit of more background, some more context of what was happening there?
Sure. So the Canadian Kurdish Community Centre staged a demonstration, and they were protesting attacks against civilian neighborhoods in Aleppo by militias that are associated with the interim Syrian government. So serious issues. And in fairness to these protesters, I do sympathize with the fact that some of them don't want to be seen protesting in Canada because it could have implications for family members who are back home. Having said that, I am of the view that a public demonstration, at Canada's busiest intersection, doesn't carry with it a reasonable expectation of privacy. And as it turns out, sometime into the demonstration, it escalated into almost conflict when a Turkish man passed by. He made a hand gesture that was perceived as being fascist, and a little bit of chaos ensued. It put a couple of officers at the center of a mob, and at least a dozen others were deployed to calm the situation. And in my view, that has real impacts on Canadians, right? As far as resources, and as far as, the safety levels in our streets. So it's not uncommon for protesters to not want to be seen because of the potential blowback to their presence. Sometimes that is more understandable than in other cases. In this situation, again, I sympathize, but I would say that Canadians have a right to be informed what's happening on their streets. And if that makes it a binary view, that's my position.
And I think it was refreshing for many of us to hear the officer's remarks that, hey, they have every right to film here in the public square. We'll say, keep your distance, have that kind of spatial respect, if you may. And otherwise, there's nothing to see here. Continue as you were. Don't come tattling to the police about someone documenting your protest. Is that a refreshing view for you to see? Or, have you started to see that kind of change happening already?
It's always kind of, we were grateful for that intervention, particularly since it's an officer who has seen us in action before and is familiar with the type of work that we do and the way that we do that work. So I'm grateful for it. I won't say that it is unheard of. We have had other officers intervene in similar ways, but there are other times where people interfere with us directly in sight of police, and, you know, we're asked to step away or to go farther back, and you know, that is, in my view, like a curtailment of our rights. So I'm grateful to that officer, and I hope that that is something that we see more of and consistently, and not just for us, but for anyone who is documenting and, you know, is respectful, at least of other people's rights in doing so, right? The notion of respect that's a little bit kind of, is it disrespectful to ask questions, to be impertinent, to disagree, to counter protest, right? There's a whole spectrum of behavior there. But at the end of the day, if you're not infringing on someone's personal space, you're not causing them physical harm, you're not intimidating them, it's fair game, especially in the context of a demonstration, which is designed to be disruptive, designed to catch eyeballs. You're not entitled to a quote unquote safe space while engaging in protest.
Exactly. And I think that idea has been lost on so many that you know, there's like this inherent right to shut down the other. And that's just not the way that it's supposed to be in Canada. Well, we have you, Caryma. I wanted to get some of your feedback on the situation that's happening at York University. And so we did touch on it a little bit yesterday on the live stream, pardon me, where sitting MP Garnet Genius was canceled essentially from a university tour at York University in Toronto today. He was supposed to speak there on rising unemployment. We'll have some more updated stats on that because this issue just continues to skyrocket in the country. But he was essentially canceled from doing so. And so Rebel News has commissioned the truck, and I think the campaign is freespeechtruck.com, where they will go and highlight the issue of free speech on especially Canadian universities in 2025 and now in 2026, and how these institutions are supposed to be of, you know, debate and the university or the arena of ideas and enlightenment have just become glorified echo chambers, essentially, not hearing diverse perspectives. And so, Caryma, I wager a bet that someone will be there documenting what happens at York University, but what's your take on what's happening there?
You know, campuses should be a space where ideas are discussed freely. And, you know, increasingly that's not the case. I recall being a student at the University of Ottawa, and Ann Coulter was coming to speak, and ultimately that was, I think the student union intervened, so I don't believe it happened. But that's, and I don't know that I was particularly invested one way or another. But this kind of reminds me of that, except in comparison to Ann Coulter, I'm not aware of anything particularly controversial this MP has said or done. He seems kind of run of the mill, and sort of mild. And even if he was controversial, a university is precisely the space where that type of dialogue should be encouraged. Now, I've heard different things. I've heard that the proper booking process wasn't followed and it had nothing to do with his views. I've heard that it was specifically because of it being a conservative event and, you know, the student union president intervening. So I don't have the facts on what actually has happened behind the scenes to lead to this decision. I know that the optics aren't great, and I think that even if it was a booking issue, that's something that should be rectified and dealt with. Students should be able to access these different viewpoints, and if they, you know, disagree, there are ways to express that don't involve shutting down an event altogether. That's my take on it. I think that the whole cancellation movement is something that easily can and will backfire on people who benefit from it right now. So it's short-sighted. And it's also short-sighted in the sense that it presupposes there's nothing valuable to be gained from discussion. And in my experience, that's the exact opposite.
Yeah, if we can pull up that tweet or that post that was just up on the screen where Garnet explains a little bit, and this is of course his perspective, and so he's trying to kind of clear the air of why the event didn't proceed, and he says, and this is people were saying, go ahead, do it anyway, and kind of like go forward with an unauthorized event. And he says, I don't believe student unions should be able to shut these things down if that was in fact the case. But he says, in this particular case, I have been working with a group of local students to facilitate the event, and I don't want to create a situation in which they could face indirect consequences. I'm always ready to deal with controversy, but I don't want to leave someone else holding the bag. And so I thought that was really a very succinct kind of highlight in the environment and the culture at Canadian schools, universities, elementary, and even high schools in the last few years, is that if you have a view that goes against the prevailing narrative, or you're dissenting against a prevailing narrative, these students could actually face repercussions or reprisal for attending that event or helping to coordinate it. What do you say about things like that? Has that been also your experience at the University of Ottawa?
Well, I mean, that on its face is highly problematic. Again, there is tangible benefit to students being involved, whether in an organizational capacity or simply attending and listening to a range of events, right? Regardless of the political substance of it. So when certain things are allowed and other things not, that's a red flag. I think back to the TMU situation in November 2025, where students had booked a space on campus to hear from an IDF soldier, and ultimately that permission was rescinded. They went off campus, and even the off-campus event protested and resulted in arrests and some violence. Right. And so that's kind of the worst case scenario, right, where it escalates to the point of in that, bloodshed there a little bit. Nothing fatal, but nonetheless, it doesn't take much for something to pop off. And as far as reprisals go, right, that could be in a social sense. I don't know if there is risk of academic reprisal from professors who have activist leanings. And, in the social sense, people have the right to associate or not with someone who they disagree with. But those consequences should not go into, it should not extend beyond kind of interpersonal reactions, right? It shouldn't limit access to resources. It shouldn't limit the ability to participate in the student body. So that was even at issue is cause for concern.
Yeah, it does seem like it's an issue proliferating within academia, heavily in Ontario, but I would say arguably also kind of just across the nation. One other thing that I was hoping to get your perspective on is the Canada First protest. I think it's scheduled for tomorrow at Nathan Phillips Square, if I remember correctly. Maybe we have a poster that we can just show quickly to make sure that I have my facts straight on the timing and the place of the Canada First rally. So, of course, denouncing our kind of mass, unfettered influx of immigration that this country has seen under the Liberal reign the last decade, but primarily from 2021 onwards. dwarfing, like absolutely dwarfing historical averages that we have responsibly seen in decades past, and calling for immediate action around this as kind of social systems buckle and crumble in the midst. Maybe we don't have a poster to share, but anyway, I believe it's tomorrow. Oh, there it is. So Stop Mass Immigration Rally tomorrow, January 10th at Nathan Phillips Square. It doesn't say the time here, but I believe it's, sometime noon-ish. And again, please correct me if I'm wrong on that. But you found, and of course, being kind of at the center of protest mania in the region, that there is already some Antifa threats surfacing. What can you tell us about this?
Canada First is an interesting phenomenon because for at least a year prior, their events were sparsely attended, not a whole lot of momentum around it, and not really counter-protested. The past few events have had significant counter-protests, including one at Christie Pitts and one at Queen's Park, and a huge police deployment, arrests that ensued, and violence against these protesters that was dealt with to varying degrees. Tomorrow, I've seen at least 3 flyers calling for counter protests. One that was framed as an anti-fashion dance party of some sort, so a play on Antifa, a little bit cutesy. One that inexplicably had a swastika and a diagolon flag sort of crossed out. And for anyone actually paying attention, there have been conflicts between Canada First and sort of this nebulous entity of Diagolon, who perceive the organizer as himself being a globalist. So they have no connection to this, and it sort of is as if someone just took clip art and kind of transposed it with no real understanding of the dynamics. And then I saw another flyer organized by Community Solidarity Toronto, which is an umbrella network made up of different organizations, including one that's headed by Nigel Barrett, who is also a board member of the Canadian. So I do anticipate that there will be a sizable counter protest. Past events have had the counter protesters outnumber the protesters. So I don't know if that will be the case tomorrow. We'll see. But if it's anything like the past few events, the counter protesters will be sort of, there are different types who show up, right? There are some who show up in black bloc, ready to fight, ready to have altercations. And then you have kind of others who are just seeing a flyer and they oppose the idea of a mass deportation. The extent to which they're connected to these issues will vary. It was even billed as a family-friendly event at Christie Pitts, and there was a segment of that was just speeches and was more family-friendly versus the people chasing the protesters out of the park. So, Nathan Phillips Square is a very big space. It's also prime sort of skating time, right? It's going to be bustling. And so my hope is that everything remains peaceful, but past precedent is not super hopeful.
Yeah, you said something interesting there, where some of the people who engage in this stuff seem to have no real understanding of the dynamics. And I think that is like the crux of a lot of the issues plaguing the divide in Canada, and this us versus them mentality. How do we get out of something like that? How do you disentangle out of that and come together and say, you know what, we actually do have a lot in common, and this is an issue that if you would just look at it from this perspective, or if you would just hold on a moment and have an open mind, we can actually chat about this, and you might see why I feel that this massive, unfettered influx of immigration may actually be harming Canada as a whole. Like, can we just talk about it?
Define the us and the them. And a lot of this, to my observation, is people take shortcuts, mental shortcuts with respect to each other. So if you use a certain keyword, or you follow X person on social media, or you have this symbol beside your handle, or any other number of indicators, then immediately you are pigeonholed as this type of person. And everything you say is invalid as a result. And, you know, it is extremely divisive. In part, it has to do with our political leadership encouraging that kind of division and neighbors versus neighbors. And, you know, you can't trust your neighbor if they say this or do that. And it takes us away from the common ground, which, as you express, exists. And in fact, I would say is even more significant than some of the flashpoints on which we choose to divide ourselves. And that's fueled by media, both legacy and you know, the kind of independent, more partisan driven, right? We are constantly separating ourselves into smaller factions and ascribing morality, right? And judging people based on things that would never have been the case, even a decade ago. I don't have the answer to it. I would say that the more we're able to listen to one another and exchange ideas, the better. But there is also a very active, you can't talk to this person without becoming just like them, right? There's this smear by association. So our freedom of assembly is under attack. Freedom of expression is under attack, where if you deviate from the orthodoxy, you're going to be ostracized. And so people self-censor to stay in line, right? And there's real tangible impact on not being or saying the right thing. So it is a very scary time. You know, we're also getting our information from relative echo chambers for the most part, and that's partly social media algorithms, it's partly, you know, self-selection. So it is a messed up. I don't have the answer apart from we've got to go back to being patient with one another. And you know, it can be hard to do that in the face of intolerance.
Put down the screens, touch grass. Like, honestly,
I was just going to say, touch
that's
grass.
what's needed.
got it.
Honestly, the algorithms, people need to understand how they work and that they're not your friend. And that the whole thing is to put you into an echo chamber, whether it is to buy an item or to buy an ideology. And it is literally shifting society. And the more I see words, actually, I know, Caryma, you did a post about how Antifa, you know, will ask a fake question on Reddit, and then people are engaging on something without realizing this has all been orchestrated. You're answering exactly the agenda that the poster, who, whether they're Antifa or whatever type of person, is doing. And that's what's happening. We're seeing words being weaponized now, just normal words. You know, we've seen that with freedom. It's been weaponized. All of a sudden it's a dirty word, and there's so many other things. You know, the amount of names I get called, I'm the same person pretty much. Like, you know, maybe I'm just a little bolder, but now apparently I'm a Christo fascist, I'm a Christo Zionist. I mean, these names just come out of thin air. And I'm not changing who I am. The algorithm is changing the perspective of who I am. So we need to touch grass more, look people in the eye, remind each other again that we have more in common than not.
I'm with you on that, and maybe roll in the snow for our current seasonal situation.
Yeah. Not me. I can still
Go
touch
do a
grass
cold
out
plunge,
here.
get your thyroid into it. Just kind of chill everything out.
Yeah, there you go. No, I'm still good.
All
over
right.
here.
Well, thanks so much, Caryma. Any final words before we wrap up your guest appearance?
Well, I'll be there at the Canada First rally to see what goes down. So I guess stay tuned for that, and maybe I will see you all out in the field.
All right. And for anybody who's not there, they can catch you at your X handle. Is it at
Caryma rules.
Caryma?
But if you
Caryma
just
rules.
Google Sad Lawyer Toronto, you'll find me.
There you have it. All right. Thanks so much for your time, Caryma. Appreciate it as always.
Bye,
Thanks for having
Caryma.
me.
All right. We have a super chat here from Politicians Never Lie. That's some sarcasm if I ever saw some. Is that Mexican? MX, is that the peso? What's going on
Aw.
there?
Well,
Which is $70, which is basically like I think it's $5 Canadian. Now our dollar is absolutely horrendous.
thanks.
But Politicians Never Lie says Rebel News equals real news equals keep up the great work. Thank you very much for that and for your support. Should we just hit what else did we have on the schedule here? Oh yes, the BC grocery store.
Right.
Drea, as a British Columbian, do you want to take us away?
Yeah, I mean, this is a sign of the times if I ever saw one. Oh, and I clicked on the wrong thing, but a grocery store in Nanaimo, I'm just finding it here on the thing, is locking up their meat
think-
now, if we want to show it on the screen.
And we have, I believe Sheila wrote this up. So if we want to source
Oh, we
back
have
to
our own version.
ourselves,
Yeah, basically,
I think, and I'm
there's
just trying to pull it up.
They're saying the amount of theft at this grocery store, in particular with meat, $70 of meat, $100 of meat, has gotten so out of control that they have to lock it up. Now, I haven't personally seen meat being locked up in my area yet, but I have seen things like toothpaste being locked up now, like just things that you didn't even realize people were stealing. And it's absolutely a sign of the time. So there you go. We have, like you said, Sheila Gunn Reid wrote it up. It's unchecked crime. And that's another key thing. Nothing is being done about these crimes. I was in Victoria. I was working in Victoria for something, and I went for a late night snack before going to the hotel. And I walked into a 7-Eleven and I saw 3 different people shoplift. And I was buying my like $8 Haagen-Dazs. Like, why am I gonna pay for this? But no, of course I'd pay. But I said, like, does this happen all the time? They're like every single night. And now you're starting to see 7-Eleven start to shut down. I mean, this is crime is unchecked, but it's also a sign of poverty too. I just have one memory I want to say is just quick. I remember being a little girl at a grocery store in Maple Ridge, and I was waiting with my mom like at the till, and she was checking out, and I just saw this like man at another till with like a box or a cart of like a carry cart of meat. He had meat, and I just thought he looked so strange, and he made like this face and he went red, and then he bolted out, and I was like, he just stole groceries, he stole meat. And then they were just like, well, he must have really needed it. And it's like, so I think it's a little bit of both of that. It's people know they can do it and they're getting away with it, so why wouldn't they? And it's also like, I can't afford to eat.
Well, and Nanaimo, correct me if I'm wrong, is on the island. So we have, inflation is so high with food prices, and we have record numbers of people visiting food banks in Canada in 2024, 2025. I expect the same for 2026 because nothing's being done to stop it. But Nanaimo, as an island town or city, their prices are actually even higher because of the nature of needing to ferry things in. Is that accurate?
Well,
So, I mean, we're struggling here on the kind of the mainland, as they say, but even on the island, things are more expensive because of that extra travel that all the products need to take.
yeah, and there's no consequence. Like for the most part, you don't get arrested anymore for shoplifting, even in the malls. And that's been happening for years, so I can only imagine what it's like. But in my previous days, at one point I was an optician and I worked in a mall, and people would just steal all the time there. And the actual rule in the mall was if the security guard didn't see the theft, they can't do anything about it. It's like, well, of course you're not seeing the theft. You're never in the stores. You're just walking around the food court doing God knows what. So, it's just too much. But the thing
It
is,
reminds me of
business,
that saying. Oh, sorry, Drea.
no, I was just going to say businesses are shutting down because of this problem and it needs to be taken seriously. But you were going to say?
Yeah, well, what you just said there, it reminds me of that saying, if a tree falls in the woods and no one's around to hear it, does the
Hmm.
tree really fall in the woods? So,
Yeah.
I mean, if you don't see the theft, does it mean that it's not happening? That's just the most bizarre logic that I have heard when referring to thefts. And this is a locally owned, like this is a ma and pop grocery store. And it's not some big box, oligarchy like Walmart or Costco. This is just a locally owned grocer trying to make a living themselves.
Hmm.
And so the employees at the very bottom of the article here that Sheila wrote up says employees say the locked cooler is intended to help keep prices down, of course, because if you
Hmm.
all have to
Yeah.
absorb the cost of theft, that's only going to make things worse for the paying legitimate
Right.
customers. And the department opened for legitimate customers. The store reported incidents to the Nanaimo RCMP, but thefts have continued. And Nanaimo continues to rank among Canada's highest crime cities, with Statistics Canada data indicating that the city's crime severity index remains above the national average. So there you have it in Nanaimo. Mom pop shops have to lock up their meat
Can we
thanks
name
to.
the grocer so that people go and give them support so people stop stealing? Um, is the name of
Yeah,
the grocery
Superette
store?
Foods,
There we go.
run by
Super.
Sarita Patel and her husband, and they
Oh,
just bought this store in late 2024, so they're like a year and a bit
yeah.
in. And now they're keeping their high-end meat products under lock and key. And this comes
Yeah.
from the post on their Facebook page. So customers have to ring a bell and request assistance to purchase items, which is this newly implemented security measure that the owners say has now become necessary because of these repeated unfettered losses. So that's
You
the
know,
saddest part too, is that like this is unfettered, right? It's just continues. There's no end in sight for
mhm.
people who are being subjected to this kind of theft and lawlessness.
And it's also a sign of the moral decay in Canada, in our country. Like there are actual countries where people are selling products outside of their house and just like leaving it, whether it be eggs or whatever and produce like that. They're literally just leaving it on the sidewalks in these little stands and people just on honor system come and buy it. Like if that happened where I live, oh my gosh, it would just be completely stolen. I do know there are
Yeah.
some rural areas on the island that are still doing that, selling their reefs and their crafts and flowers and stuff. So there still are some places in Canada. But I just mean the fact that people are so emboldened to just walk in and steal from a mom and pop shop grocer is a sign of moral decay as well.
Being rural, I absolutely love that, especially in the spring and the summer when you have these like farmer little pop-up markets, kind of just people
Hmm.
erect these whatever box, like shelving situations, and they just put a little container there, put the money
Yeah.
in with a little lock
Yeah.
box, or maybe not even. The guy that I buy eggs from, he just has a little container and you put the money in and it's open so that, sometimes I'll come with a 20
Right.
and I'll need some change. So I just pop it open,
Yeah.
grab some change. And he has had people come and steal his
Oh
day's
no.
worth of whatever egg money that he collected.
Uh,
And that might seem like it's not a big deal to someone because it's, $40 or whatever. But as the guy who's raising birds in a day and age where the feed has gone up fourfold
yes.
in the last 5 years, it definitely hurts the little guy. And I had a friend who they have their own little family garden and they had an abundance of certain things I think it was last year. And just a little anecdote. So she built a little farm stand and she's a stay-at-home mom and her husband works. And so she does a lot of homemade things for the children. She makes all their bread, they do their little garden. And so she thought, well, I have an abundance this year. I'm going to build a little farm stand at the end of my driveway. Like literally this is
Hmm.
their house, and sell the abundance for just like not very much, but enough that as a stay-at-home mom, it gives her a
Helps
little bit
out.
of extra and subsequently her family. And then she wanted to do some baking also to kind of just put out her extra baking and bread and muffins, whatever.
Hmm.
And someone came along and jams, thing like this. Someone came along and stole all the money and all the products that she
So
had
evil.
lovingly spent hours in her kitchen in her home making jams and breads and muffins and tarts and the abundance that they had from their garden. Um, and this was in very rural. I mean, this is probably about 45 minutes outside of where I am, which is still fairly rural. And it's just so sad to see that
Yeah.
we can no longer simply have market stands at the ends of our driveways and trust that people will be honest and good-hearted and leave the money as, you know, when they take the products or steals everything from it.
Yeah.
It's a really sad state of affairs, so I definitely empathize in that way.
Thou shall not steal. That used to matter. Used to
There you
matter
have
to
it.
society. Oh
JP
man.
Alberta First gives us $10. Thank you very
Thank
much. And
you.
says, is this the first locking up of food? Not surprising, given the absolutely ridiculous levels of food bank usage we are seeing. Yeah, as you said, Drea, this is a result of poverty also. And I'm not making every way you look at it, it's sad. And even the family, the mom trying to make a few extra bucks for her family, gets everything cleaned house. It is so, so sad. So let's just touch on this economy
Yeah, same theme.
joblessness, because speaking
Yeah.
of poverty, this comes from the CBC. The Canadian economy added 8,200 jobs in December, while unemployment rose to, oh, this is so staggering, 6.8%. And this was what Garnet, the MP, was
Yep.
trying to go to York University to speak on this exact thing. I think he actually posted a video. Yeah, breaking news. Don't hear it from me. Listen to what he has to say about the situation in Canada with rising unemployment.
Hi, folks. We've got some new job numbers just released this morning. Unfortunately, they underline the serious problems in the Canadian job market. We're seeing a 0.3% increase in the overall unemployment rate, a 0.5% increase in the youth unemployment rate. 73,000 people lost their jobs in Canada in the last month, and we now have the highest public sector employment ever. These are very concerning numbers. They underline the need for a real jobs plan. They underline the fact that the Liberal approach to jobs and the economy simply is not working. We need to unleash the economy, fix immigration, fix training, and build homes where the jobs are. That was the Conservative jobs plan that we released in the fall, and we continue to call on the government to implement the constructive proposals we're putting forward. Very bad job numbers out today. Again, a 0.3% increase in the unemployment rate, 0.5% increase for youth, 73,000 jobs lost.
Those are staggering numbers. And especially as the public sector grows, right? So the bureaucracy, the government gets bigger. Well, the private sector falls to the wayside. And youth unemployment is especially concerning because these are like your run-of-the-mill cashier, fast food, drive-through type jobs that really give teenagers, our kids, a foot in the door. They're not
Yeah.
glamorous. They're not intended to make them a millionaire, but they give them real job skills and interpersonal skills needed to thrive and develop as a person in the employment world. And these jobs are being undercut through temporary foreign worker programs, the Canada Mobility Program. Again, this unfettered immigration influx that dwarfs historical averages.
Well,
Absolutely skyrockets.
self-check-ins too. I mean, we are just narrowing down the opportunity for our youth, and of course, mass immigration. You can see a lot of those jobs are being filled by foreigners instead of locals. And when it talks about 8,000 or whatever jobs that came in the month of December, 81,000 more people came to the workforce, meaning there was 81,000 more people needing work in just that month of December. So even if you're putting in more jobs, it's not doing really much for that issue. Another thing that stood out in the article to me is that we're seeing like an unprecedented amount of over 55 being employed. Like it's at a higher percent that over 55. Well, why is that? It's because before some could retire early. Now you probably have people who thought they were going to retire, not retiring anymore, or people who did retire coming back to the workforce. So we're seeing less youth and more of our elderly people having to work. This is serious, serious stuff that every Canadian should be concerned on. If our youth can't
Look at
find
that
jobs,
graph.
the graph is terrifying. But you know, when youth can't find jobs or they're not doing sports, what do? They get into trouble. I know you guys have a problem out there. I don't know if this is even on your radar, but I have family back east, and according to them, there's like a lot of young guys being recruited by, you know, gang members because, you know, they just have nothing to do and there's no jobs. And the gang members also know that they're going to get a slap on the wrist if they get caught with these, you know, robberies and things like that. So, I mean, it affects everything if we can't give our youth jobs, hope, a future. And of course, the ones that don't get into trouble, well, they're probably just going to move. And then what happens to us? So,
yeah, and we've seen that also,
yeah.
immigration being massive the last several months and kind of trickling certainly the last few years, especially as Canada saw some of the harshest and most restrictive infringements to human rights and civil liberties throughout the COVID era. And many things happening that are so concerning with the government, with censorship and freedom of expression, and as Caryma, you know, points out, also freedom of assembly, and this divisive rhetoric that we have continually coming from the political class. It's a bit of a mess.
It is. One good news, since this has been such a depressing live. So back to the machines replacing, you know, the youth's jobs. So all of the, Dollaramas out where I was, they all had like a whole bunch of machines. Like maybe 3 years ago, they replaced tons of their staff with that. And they've actually taken them all out because of theft. Too many people were stealing with the machines. And I saw that too. I saw actually some teens, you know, swipe, and then pocket. Like they would pocket every fourth item or something like that. So, you know, there's an up. Now they're hiring humans again and they don't have the machines. So that's good.
There you have it. All right, we'll end on that good news note. I think we're caught up for all the super chats and the Rumble rants. And it's been a fun, oh, there's one more. Sorry. We have Murray Wright K5U gives $20 with a 20. Thank you very much for your generosity and your support, especially as we talk about these trying financial times in Canada. It is so very much appreciated. Everyone who works to keep our journalism afloat, because I mean, we have to talk about this stuff. And there's that saying, you know, if not now, when? If not you, then who? If not now, then when, kind of thing. And I always try to keep that in the back of my mind. Like if no one talks about it, then how do we achieve progress, right? The left likes to say, oh, well, we are so progressive, and then you don't achieve progress by censoring everyone else. So there's my tidbit. Happy Friday, TGIF. Thanks so much, Drea, for being the regular Friday panel correspondent. And thanks everyone who chipped in to the show. Thanks everybody behind the scenes who make sure that you can find the show and gets all those links ready and pulls things up as we request it. Super producer Olivia and Efron. And I suppose that's it. Have a great weekend, everybody. We'll see you back on Monday, same time and place, for your usual Rebel Roundup from 1 to 2 p.m. Eastern. And until that time, stay sane and question everything.